Hello there, faithful listener. You've tuned in to Season 7 of the Bible Explained podcast. So make sure to grab your cup of coffee, because today we are going to be discussing the book of 2 Samuel. Hey guys, good morning and welcome to the Bible Explained podcast. Hope you've had a great week so far. Of course, today is the best day of the week because it's Friday. But I hope all of you have been enjoying your week so far and the weather has been nice for you. So let me know how the weather is in your area. You'll find my contact information listed in the description of this episode. I really love hearing from you guys, and I love hearing about where you're from and how you found the podcast and what kind of coffee and tea you enjoy, and also what the weather typically is in your area. I love hearing about it because I have to live vicariously through you, because where I live, it's either negative 100 or it's like 170 degrees. There's no in between in my area. I'm either living in the middle of a jungle in the equator or I'm living at the North Pole. Actually, where I used to live, which was back in Pennsylvania, it used to get colder in Pennsylvania, they said, than in Alaska. I remember that. And that's not uncommon. It gets regularly very cold in Pennsylvania. Thankfully, where I live now in my lovely state of Ohio, it doesn't get as frigid as it did when I was in Pennsylvania. But right now, we are dealing with some heat. But thankfully, yesterday was a really, really nice and temperate day. Anyway, guys, make sure to grab your favorite cup of coffee, preferably 7 Weeks Coffee, the coffee brand that supports life in the womb. You'll find that listed in the description of this episode. They make great coffee, and they also support pregnancy centers across the U.S. They are a great mission, and they make a fantastic cup of coffee, if I do say so myself. And speaking of making food, let's go ahead and read 2 Samuel 13, verses 1 through 22. And we're going to read a story about a sister who makes some food for her sick brother who is faking being sick. I'll be reading this out of the W.E.B. After this, Absalom the son of David had a beautiful sister whose name was Tamar, and Amnon the son of David loved her. Amnon was so troubled that he became sick because of his sister Tamar, for she was a virgin, and it seemed hard to Amnon to do anything to her. But Amnon had a friend, whose name was Jonadab, the son of Shemaiah, David's brother. And Jonadab was a very subtle man. He said to him, "Why, son of the king, are you so sad from day to day? Won't you tell me?" Amnon said to him, "I love Tamar, my brother Absalom's sister." Jonadab said to him, "Lie down on your bed and pretend to be sick. When your father comes to see you, tell him, 'Please let my sister Tamar come and give me bread to eat, and prepare the food in my sight that I may see it and eat it from her hand.'" So Amnon lay down and faked being sick. When the king came to see him, Amnon said to the king, "Please let my sister Tamar come and make me a couple of cakes in my sight that I may eat from her hand." Then David sent home to Tamar, saying, "Go now to your brother Amnon's house and prepare food for him." So Tamar went to her brother Amnon's house, and he was lying down. She took dough and kneaded it, made cakes in his sight, and baked the cakes. She took the pan and poured them out before him, but he refused to eat. Amnon said, "Have all the men leave me." Then every man went out from him. Amnon said to Tamar, "Bring the food into the room that I may eat from your hand." Tamar took the cakes which she had made and brought them into the room to Amnon her brother. When she had brought them near to him to eat, he took hold of her and he said to her, "Come lie with me, my sister." She answered him, "No, my brother, don't force me. For no such thing ought to be done in Israel. Don't you do this folly. As for me, where would I carry my shame? And as for you, you will be one of the fools in Israel. Now therefore, please speak to the king, for he will not withhold me from you." However, he would not listen to her voice. And being stronger than she, he forced her and lay with her. Then Amnon hated her with an exceedingly great hatred, for the hatred which he had hated her was greater than the love which he had loved her. Amnon said to her, "Arise, be gone." She said to him, "Not so, because this great wrong in sending me away is worse than the other thing that you did to me." But he would not listen to her. Then he called his servant who ministered to him and said, "Now put this woman out from me and bolt the door after her." She had a garment of various colors on her, for the king's daughters who were virgins dressed in such robes. Then his servant brought her out and bolted the door after her. Tamar put ashes on her head and tore her garment of various colors that was on her. And she laid her hand on her head and went away, crying aloud as she went. Absalom, her brother, said to her, "Has Amnon your brother been with you? But now hold your peace, my sister. He is your brother. Don't take this thing to heart." So Tamar remained desolate in her brother Absalom's house. But when King David heard of all these things, he was very angry. Absalom spoke to Amnon neither good nor bad, for Absalom hated Amnon because he had forced his sister Tamar. It's really interesting that the story takes place directly after God's punishment to David in the last chapter. One of the punishments of David was that his household was going to be at war with each other forever, basically, because of the sin that David had done. And so directly after God giving that punishment to David, here is part of that punishment coming to fruition right now. It even says that in the first verse. It says, "After all this, Absalom, the son of David, had a beautiful sister." So this does not seem like much time has passed at all from the time that David committed adultery with Bathsheba. So it says, "After this, Absalom, the son of David, had a beautiful sister whose name was Tamar. And Absalom was the third in line for the throne. He was the son of Maacah, the daughter of Talmai, king of Geshur. And Absalom had a beautiful sister whose name was Tamar, who was his true sister. Like they were both from the same mother, this mother being Maacah. And it says that Amnon, the son of David, loved her. So Amnon was the firstborn of all of David's children, and he was the son of Ahinoam the Jezreelitess. So Amnon was Tamar's half-brother. It says Amnon, the son of David, loved Tamar. Now, this was not a true kind of love. This was a lustful kind of love. It says that Amnon was so troubled that he became sick because of his sister Tamar, for she was a virgin. And it seemed hard to Amnon to do anything to her. So that verse right there proves that this was not a true love. This was a lust, because it says that it seemed hard for Amnon to do anything to her. And that's because virgins were protected back in these days. Secondly, virgins were ready for marriage. So Tamar would have been of marrying age. And it's very possible that she had a couple suitors that were interested in her also. So that's the second reason why Amnon thought there was nothing he could do to her. Thirdly, Tamar had a brother who was Absalom, and I'm sure that Amnon was afraid of Absalom. And fourthly, it was forbidden by God for brothers to marry their sisters or to have sexual relations with their sisters, even if they were half-sisters and brothers, because they still came from the same father. So it didn't matter. So Amnon, of course, is sick because he can't sleep with his sister. That's what this boils down to. So it says here that Amnon, though, had a friend, and this friend was named Jonadab, and he was the son of Shemaiah, David's brother. So Jonadab was one of the cousins of Amnon. And it says that Jonadab was a very subtle man. So this means he was very crafty. He was thinking things up, and they weren't good things. So he says to Amnon, "Why, son of the king, are you so sad from day to day? Won't you tell me?" So Amnon admits straight out to Jonadab that he's in love with his sister. This proves that Jonadab was not the most upstanding person, right? Because Amnon was unafraid to admit this sin to Jonadab, that he was like lusting after his own sister. He was unafraid to say this straight out to Jonadab, and Jonadab's like, "Oh, cool. Yeah, I get it." So here's what Jonadab says. He says, "Lie down on your bed and pretend to be sick. When your father comes to see you, tell him, 'Please let my sister Tamar come and give me bread to eat, and prepare the food in my sight that I may see it and eat it from her hand.'" So Jonadab thinks up this thing for Amnon to do in order for Amnon to rape his sister. He says, "Pretend to be sick. And then when the king is worried about you and comes to see you, then just request something so simple from him. Just say, I want my sister Tamar to come and make some delicious food for me. If she does, then I will feel much better." So it says that's exactly what Amnon does. He gets right to it. It says Amnon lay down and faked being sick. I don't even know if the words were out of Jonadab's mouth yet before Amnon was lying down on his bed. It says, when the king came to see him, Amnon said to the king, please let my sister Tamar come and make me a couple of cakes in my sight that I may eat from her hand. So David's probably thinking, okay, that's kind of weird, but I guess it's an innocent enough request. I mean, the servants are going to be nearby, and maybe Amnon just likes Tamar's food as compared to anybody else's. So David finishes up visiting with Amnon, and he goes back to the palace and he summons Tamar. He says, go now to your brother Amnon's house and prepare food for him. So Tamar obeyed. She obeyed, probably thinking that Amnon was actually very sick. She had no reason not to think that. And so maybe she's like, I will do whatever I can do to help him feel better. That's probably what Tamar was thinking. So she goes, and the servants are in the house, it says, and she's making food, and Amnon's just watching her make food, staring at her. And it says that after she was done baking the cakes, it says she took out the pan and poured them out before him, and he refused to eat. So that shows right there that Amnon was faking, because he just said to King David that the only way he would eat was if Tamar fed him, but now suddenly Tamar's trying to feed him, and he doesn't want to eat. So yes, he was faking and scheming something else. Amnon said, have all the men leave me. So he sends all of his servants out. He says they all went out from him and probably stood outside the door. And so Amnon says to Tamar, bring the food into the room that I may eat from your hand. So maybe Amnon is being like, I'll be more cozy on my bed if you'll just come and feed me there. So Tamar goes. It says she took the cakes which she had made and brought them into the room to Amnon, her brother. And I really don't think that Tamar knew what was going to happen. I think she just got an order from the king. I think she was possibly concerned for Amnon's health. I don't think she suspected what was about to happen, because she even says this kind of thing is unheard of in Israel, for a brother to rape his sister. That doesn't happen in Israel. So it says, when she brought the cakes near to him to eat, he took hold of her and said to her, come and lie with me, my sister. She answered him, no, my brother, don't force me, for no such thing ought to be done in Israel. Don't you do this folly. And then she tries to persuade him. She says, where would I carry my shame? If this happens to me, I'm a virgin. Nobody's going to want to marry me. I will be destroyed for the rest of my life. Please don't do this to me. And then she says, and as for you, you will be as one of the fools in Israel. So she says, if this word gets out, not only will I be corrupted by this and my reputation will be ruined, but your reputation will be ruined as well. And you will be like one of the fools in Israel. Then she says, go and speak to the king, for he will not withhold me from you. Now it's very possible that Tamar was only saying this so that she could get away from her brother. And this was a way for her to stall, saying that, if you just speak to the king about this matter, certainly we can be married. And maybe she didn't believe that. Maybe she knew that King David would immediately shoot that possibility down because it was against the Old Testament law. Maybe she knew that and was just trying to persuade her brother to let her go. But it's also possible that David would have actually let Amnon marry Tamar, because there is not a single time in Scripture where David corrects his sons and doesn't give in to them. Not a single time. He always allows his sons to either walk all over him or walk all over other people, and he indulges them completely. So it's very possible that Tamar knew that David would actually give her in marriage to Amnon, but that would be better in Tamar's mind than being raped. Because think about how women were treated back in these days. They were not treated well. And so if they slept with another person, even if it was rape, before marriage, that would stain their reputation completely. And they'd be desolate for the rest of their lives because they'd have nobody to live with. They'd have no husband. So it'd be a very bad situation for them. But here's the thing. The Old Testament law actually said that if a woman got raped, she would A, still be considered a virgin after that, and she'd be free to marry whoever she wanted, and B, her rapist was to die. So the Old Testament laws were very condemning towards rapists. So Tamar, knowing all of this, tries to take some control of the situation, but it does not work. It says he would not listen to her voice, and he was stronger than she was, so he forced her and laid with her. So he completely raped her 100%. And you can tell she was trying to get away from him. You can tell because that's what scripture implies here, that he was stronger than her. She might have been yelling. She might have been trying to get out of there. She might have been fighting, but he was stronger than her and he laid with her. So after Amnon raped his sister, it says that he hated her with an exceedingly great hatred, meaning he despised her guts. It says he hated her even more than how much he loved her before. So with all of that pining away he was doing for her before, this hatred was nothing like that. It was way worse. He absolutely despised her. And that's because he got what he wanted out of her. Once again, this was not true love. This was lust. And so now that he got what he wanted, he no longer had any interest in her whatsoever, and he hated her, and he possibly blamed her for all of it because, Amnon knew that he committed a huge sin and that rapists were to die. He knew all of that, and it's very possible that he blamed his sister Tamar for all of that also. So it says that Amnon said to her, "Arise and be gone." So he's like, get out of my house, get out of my room. And she tries once again to remedy the situation. And she says, "Not so, because this great wrong in sending me away is worse than the other thing that you did to me." So she's basically like, no, don't abandon me now that you have ruined my reputation completely and I can no longer get married. Make it right, is what she's trying to say. She's saying, make it right and let me stay with you at least so that I will be taken care of and protected in spite of what you have done to me. But he would not listen to her. He threw her out, is what it says. He had his servant come in and it says, "Now put this woman out from me," and bolt the door after her. So he threw her out of the room and he bolted the door so that she could never bother him again. It says she was wearing a garment of various colors for the king's daughters who were virgins dressed in such robes. Now this makes me think that David had other daughters as well, because it says the king's daughters who were virgins dressed in such robes. It's very possible that David did have multiple daughters, but they're not mentioned. Tamar is the only daughter that we do know of. But it could also be that Tamar was the only daughter, and just in general, king's daughters wore a specific type of robe that Tamar was wearing right here. I have a hard time believing that, though, because David had so many concubines and wives. We don't actually know how many concubines and wives David had, that it's hard for me to imagine that David didn't have other daughters, and Tamar's the only one that's mentioned. So anyway, Tamar's wearing this robe, this colorful robe that virgin princesses wore. So it says that she put ashes on her head and she tore her garment of various colors. And it says that she laid her hands on her head and she went her way, crying aloud as she went. She was not hiding this situation at all, which is very good, actually. This was very good that she was not hiding this situation, because you can imagine back in these days, it might have been better for young women to hide this situation. But Tamar was not willing to do that. She was very open with what had just happened to her. So she is like publicly mourning because of what her brother just did to her. She had her garment all ripped up. She had these ashes all over her. She was holding her head in her hands. She was crying bitterly, is what it says. And she was weeping as she ran. And Absalom, her true brother, sees her, and immediately he knows what happens. Immediately he knew. This means that Absalom possibly had some reservations when he heard that Tamar was going to go visit Amnon. Maybe Absalom had heard some rumors about Amnon's attraction towards Tamar. It's possible. Or it could be that Absalom just knew Amnon and knew what kind of a man he was and was not shocked to see Tamar in this condition coming back. So Absalom knew. It says, "Has Amnon, your brother, been with you?" And Absalom is so angry at what happened. But he tries to comfort his sister. He says, "Hold your peace, my sister. He is your brother. Don't take this thing to heart." So he's basically like, "Okay, Tamar, it's okay. I know that your reputation has been ruined. I know that it's going to be hard for you to get married now. But don't worry. I will take care of you," is basically what Absalom says. So Tamar remained desolate in her brother Absalom's house, meaning she remained a spinster, I guess. She never got married, and Absalom took care of her the entire time. At least Tamar had some place to go. You can imagine if Tamar wouldn't have been a princess, or if Tamar wouldn't have had family members, how bad this situation could have gone for her. But thankfully, she did have somebody to take care of her, and that happened to be Absalom, her brother. David ended up hearing about what happened, and it says that he was very angry. But he didn't do anything about it. All he did was feel internal anger. He never forced Amnon to remedy the situation. He never comforted Tamar. He didn't do anything. He was just angry. That's it. And it says Absalom spoke to Amnon neither good nor bad, for Absalom hated Amnon because he had forced his sister Tamar. So Absalom now hates his brother for what had just happened. Hates him with a passion. But he pretends to be cool. He pretends to be cool with him. It says that he spoke to Amnon neither good nor bad. So whenever he'd pass Amnon, he'd just be like, "Hey there, brother," and just keep on walking. It is kind of what I imagine happened. It says that he never spoke anything bad or good to Amnon. However, he was certainly scheming something. That is for sure because of what happened to Tamar. Now, had David punished Amnon for what he had done to Tamar and found Tamar a husband in spite of all of that, and listened to the Old Testament laws, then I think Absalom would not have had as much hatred for Amnon that we are going to read about in the future. Well, faithful listeners, the episode that I did with Sarah Im, who was the woman who survived the killing fields of Cambodia, is up on Ko-fi for all of you who are members. Members get first access to that video. It will be up on YouTube in several days. Stay tuned for that. It's a great episode. You're not going to want to miss it. All right, guys, I hope you have a fantastic Friday afternoon and that the weather is super nice for you all. I will see you on Monday, bright and early, 6 a.m. or whenever you choose to wake up. Happy listening, and God bless.